This is 10 reasons not to move to Australia. Is this another one of those untrue anti-tourism Australia videos? My name's Ross and my family and I emigrated to Australia during a global pandemic. Since moving here, we've come to love everything about this beautiful country. So let's find out how valid some of these 10 reasons not to move to Australia actually are.
G'day mates, how you going? Because today we're talking about the land down under.
Oh my god, he's got one of those annoying voices, but he's got one of those voices that I've heard before. Hang on a minute, is this the guy that did the honey badger video?
This is the honey badger. Watch it run in slow motion.
Well, based upon his previous work, this could either be really annoying or one of the greatest videos ever.
Number 10. It gets hot.
What do you mean it's hot? Right, of course it's hot, you idiot. That's one of the reasons why we moved here.
Contrary to popular belief, most of Australia isn't all perfect year-round temperatures. Well, unless you're in Sydney or Perth, but even those get some bad days each year. The real issue in most of Australia is the heat.
He's saying it like it's some kind of false advertising that people don't know it gets quite warm in Australia.
The heat makes the rest of the country basically unlivable, especially in the outback where temperatures can reach 50 degrees Celsius. That's 122 Fahrenheit. Heck, it gets so hot in the desert here that the opal miners back in the day ended up building an underground settlement called Cooper Pedy to protect them from the heat. It's pretty cool, actually.
To be fair, I would like to go to Cooper Pedy at some point, just to have a visit. New Zealand's got hobbits, Australia has weird people that live underground.
And even though the cooling effects of the ocean make the coastal areas more livable, most of the cities will still get days above 40 degrees Celsius during the summer.
He's making it out to seem like we're all just sitting here sweating our asses off in the extreme heat, unable to cope. One of the main reasons why we left the UK is in the UK you get another extreme, and it's just freezing cold, or wet all of the time. Quite frankly, a nice little change up into the warm weather is quite welcome. And this country is also more geared up to cope with the extremes of temperature. If it gets too hot and I get too sweaty, I just turn the aircon on. Do you know why we didn't have aircon in the UK? Because it was only hot for about 3 weeks in the year. And for those 3 weeks, where the houses weren't designed to cope with the extreme heat, we just melted inside our homes, with the windows wide open and the curtains drawn to try and keep out any extreme heat. Even the M25 every now and again would start to melt, and it didn't even get as hot as here. Quite frankly, whatever the weather is going to be, I just want to live in the country that's designed to cope with it.
Add in some of the most beautiful beaches in the world with tons of sunny days to enjoy, and the fact that you're pretty darn close to the equator, and it isn't hard to see why 2/3 of Australians are diagnosed with skin cancer by the age of 70.
70? Let's face it, the UV index is really high in Australia, but most people now do actually do the slip, slop, slap and try and cover up. He's making it out like no one gets skin cancer anywhere else in the world. Seems like it's a worldwide problem.
And I'd be remiss to not talk about that other thing the heat and sun cause as well. Bushfires. You've probably already heard about the wildfires that have decimated 46 million acres and killed 451 people this past year alone. But sadly, it's not the first, and it definitely won't be the last.
Bushfires are a thing that happen all around the world. I'm sure in America they also have really bad bushfires, because we always hear about it when it burns down a celebrity's home.
Number 9. It's isolated.
It's that same reason that's made Australia one of the greater countries to come to during the COVID pandemic, both during and after.
You might have wondered why so many Australians have left their beautiful homeland that seems a lot like paradise to most Americans. But the reality is that many Aussies feel trapped, lonely, and isolated from the rest of the world.
In fact, one of the reasons why the housing market is booming at the moment is because lots of Aussies have decided that the rest of the world's a bit shit and they want to come back.
And while you may think that's silly, since you can just hop on a plane and fly to a nearby country like Indonesia or Singapore, it actually isn't so simple.
When we lived in the UK, it was very easy to get on a plane and kind of visit any country in Europe. And thankfully, while we were there, we did get to visit a lot of them. One of the perks of moving to Australia is now a lot of other countries that were really far away from you and now are less far away. As well as this country itself is absolutely massive and beautiful. And once the borders do actually all reopen to everyone, then I'm going to enjoy visiting more of the country that I came to live in.
Before you comment, so what if other countries are far away? Australia's huge, just explore that. Well, the thing about that is that Australia isn't just isolated from other countries. The cities here are actually really isolated from each other. For example, the two closest big cities would be Sydney and Melbourne, but they're still an 8.5-hour drive apart. Melbourne to Brisbane's an 18-hour drive, Adelaide to Darwin's a 31-hour drive, and Sydney to Perth is a 41-hour non-stop trek with pretty much nothing in between.
These all sound to me like great road trips. The kind of adventures that lifelong memories are found on. Planes are quick, but no one really remembers a plane journey. Imagine the places you could visit on some of these fantastic road trips. And let's face it, the real Australia isn't really in the main cities.
Number 8. Time zones. Speaking of isolation, Australia isn't just physically isolated from other countries. You're also going to have trouble keeping in touch with your family or friends back home unless they live somewhere in Asia.
Let's face it, this was probably a problem about 20 years ago. Number one, my parents do actually live in one of those Asian countries, so it's not that difficult to just ring them up.
Now, Australia has 3 main time zones, but for the sake of just showing how different the times are, when it's 7 a.m. in Sydney, it's 10 p.m. in London, and when it's 6 a.m. in Perth, it'd be 6 p.m. in New York.
His time zone argument to call back into the UK, well, it's ridiculous. There's 9 hours difference. He's just picked the worst timings to actually call someone. With our daughter and calling back to grandparents, we normally need to pick a time when she's awake. So rather than his times, when it's 7 p.m. in Sydney, it's 10 a.m. in the UK. So we call them on the weekends, every week, and everything's just fine. Let's face it, I probably speak to people more regularly in the UK now that I've moved.
I get that this is just more of an inconvenience than a huge deal, but it can get pretty tedious trying to schedule a call with your international family and friends.
Overall, it seems like this guy's just attacking the geography of Australia. So as long as you sat in a geography classroom and kind of paid a bit of attention, you probably already know these things anyway. And if they're putting you off, Australia probably isn't for you, my friend.
Number 7. The internet sucks.
Now this one, I do actually agree with him.
Because even if you schedule that Zoom call perfectly, the internet might just randomly cut out or start lagging, and by the time it's fixed, it's probably the other person's bedtime.
I don't think the internet really kind of cuts out, but it definitely lags because the internet here is much slower, unless you live right in the middle of the city where the end of the cable is.
A 200 gigabyte a month plan in Brisbane with download speeds only up to 12 megabits per second will cost you $65 a month.
He's kind of right. We do have really slow internet, and we do pay a lot of money for the privilege of buffering. I think here he's quoting the lowest tariffs. You can get better tariffs in some places, just not where we live apparently. The internet company had to give us some money back because they couldn't deliver on the internet speeds that they'd quoted us. It was only $10, but it was a nicely worded letter.
Number 6. Everything wants to kill you. If the frustratingly slow internet speeds are enough to make you want to go on a digital cleanse and take a camping trip out in the wilderness, well, don't, because literally everything here is trying to kill you. Yeah, Australia's home to box jellyfish, stonefish, tons of poisonous snakes and spiders, blue-ringed octopuses, stingrays, sharks, and the largest saltwater crocodiles in the world.
Sure, there are a lot of dangerous animals in Australia, and lots of ones that we never had in the UK. But let's just think a minute and have a little bit of common sense when dealing with some of the most dangerous animals in the world.
Australia just isn't a place where you can spontaneously go for a hike or swim without being very cautious of your surroundings at all times.
Don't go near them. It's not like they're just lurking at the end of our drive or in dark, scary alleys waiting to pounce on us. Maybe this threat of dangerous animals isn't actually too bad. Maybe it's Darwinism. After all, it's one of the reasons why they have to put warning stickers not to drink the fluid that comes out of your battery in your car.
Well, you might think they're so cute and cuddly. They can be vicious, and many Australians actually see them as pests. The only reason the country hasn't declared war on them yet is because the kangaroos outnumber Australians 2-1, and the Aussies don't want a repeat of what happened in the Great Emu War of 1932. Spoiler alert. The emus won.
Whilst commenting about a war that Australia has apparently lost seems comical, shall we talk about the wars that America has lost?
Number 5. Bad drivers. While many Aussies try to blame the kangaroo and their lack of road sense as the reason for so many car accidents, only 7,992 kangaroo collisions actually occurred in 2019, which was less than 5% of the total automobile accidents in Australia. So maybe the drivers should start taking a little more responsibility.
I can kind of attest to this one as well. Australians do seem to carelessly drive a little bit.
Now, of course, every town, city, state, and country is going to have its fair share of bad drivers, but the drivers in Australia are really some of the worst in the world. In fact, Aussies actually upload more videos of illegal and bad road behavior than any other country.
I think I know why this is. It's because in Australia, people just love taking the piss, and there are some absolute plonkers on the road. They're simply just trying to share the numptiness around so that we can all have a bit of a laugh.
Number 4. It's expensive. Aside from the aforementioned incredibly expensive internet, pretty much everything else here is expensive too.
I figured this one out. I know why Australia is so expensive. And it's got nothing to do with the importing or high manufacturing costs in this country. They're simply fleecing every single dollar they can from unwitting tourists that come here, especially Americans.
Of course, the cost of living varies based on location, with it generally being cheaper the farther you get from the coast and major cities, but Australia as a whole is pretty pricey.
Because after living here for just over a year, I don't really notice the expensive prices anymore. And the reason for that is that my wages are so much higher in Australia than they were in the UK. In the UK, stuff was cheap because I was paid a pittance for the job that I did. In America, they're paid even less. So that's why stuff is probably even cheaper there. Here, people get a fair wage for the things that they do. And whilst it might seem expensive to any other people in the world, well, that's probably one of the reasons why you want to come and live here, and earn here, and enjoy this beautiful country.
Number 3. Places close early. To add on to the fact that things are expensive here, it might be difficult to even buy said things if you're working normal hours, since most shops, stores, and restaurants usually close by the time the sun sets during the week. And if they operate at all on the weekends, they're probably going to have even more limited hours. This one isn't a huge deal once you're used to it and plan accordingly, but it can be a big culture shock if you're coming from the States where there's an abundance of 24-hour businesses.
There we go, yet another reason why in other countries they fleece you for all the money that they can. Why should you have to work at some ungodly hour to earn less money than you actually deserve? The reason why shops shut up early is because people have already earned enough. And this is testament to the working culture here, where people work to live rather than live to work. We left the UK because we were fed up of working too hard for the little money that we got. Now that we're here, we probably work about the same, but get paid far more than we did in the UK. Our standard of living has vastly improved, and you think that this is a reason not to move to this country? You can't expect to have this fantastic way of life, and then other people in other industries not to enjoy it as well.
Number 2. Poor mental health services. Despite their vivacious exterior, Australians usually keep their feelings to themselves. It's just not normal to talk about personal problems here, and the mental health of the nation is suffering for it.
I don't think it's fair to say that Australians have poor mental health. Whilst I do agree that there's an overtly masculine culture here that kind of seems a bit outdated sometimes. Australia is actually famous for inventing some of the more modern mental health initiatives, like Movember, which was started up in Melbourne in 2003. And the other thing about mental health, or any health for that matter, is that we live in a country with free healthcare. So if you do have any mental health issues, there's always someone to talk to, for free, rather than having to pay through the nose for some therapist who cares more about your bank account rather than your mental health situation.
Now, there are free care options available for at-risk individuals, but since there's a shortage of psychologists, it's left many other people with no one to talk to about their problems unless they pay a lot of money out of pocket. And even then, many doctors and citizens as a whole aren't well educated in the case of mental health here, so good therapy isn't easy to find. 1 in 5 Australians between the ages of 16 and 85 have experienced mental health illness, and over 20% of young Australians struggle with depression or anxiety.
There's a shortage of psychologists everywhere. There's a shortage of doctors everywhere. In fact, most of the UK doctors end up moving to Australia because they have better working conditions and pay as well.
Maybe the mental health issues here actually contribute to that risk-taking, fearless reputation most Australians have earned themselves, since it's kind of the culture here to just suck up your problems and pretend you're always having a good time.
Let's face it, Movember is the most Australian way that you can deal with your mental health. Rather than paying to have to talk to someone, why don't you use that money, talk to your mates, down the pub, and then your problems all disappear. That's not an advert for alcohol. Drink responsibly, kids.
Number 1. The immigration process is very difficult. While visiting Australia is as easy as having a valid passport, filling in an online application, and paying a small fee, becoming a permanent resident is incredibly difficult for US citizens.
Now I can attest to this, being a permanent resident myself. The whole process from start to finish probably took over 2 years. And we live in a country where you kind of have to earn your right to be here.
Now, for young Americans eager to explore the world, Australia does offer a program known as the Working Holiday Visa, which allows you to live in the country for a year or two in exchange for paid work. But if you want to move here permanently, there are a lot of requirements, such as a confirmation of funds, a skill set assessment, proficiency in English, a health exam, no criminal record, and being under the age of 45.
Over 10 years ago now, when I chose what do I want to do with my life, choosing to become a teacher probably was highly motivated by me wanting to move to Australia.
For the most part, you either have to have a lot of money saved up and plan to start a business in Australia, or offer a highly desired skill that no available Australian worker has.
But it's not like there's a tiny exclusive skills list of things that you have to have in order to move here. The list is actually quite large and is full of a wide range of skills, not just reserved for really, really smart rich people. If you're thinking about moving to Australia, have a look at the skills list. See what's available to you and start the process early. Don't wait until you end up being one of these people that is apparently over 45 and over the hill, wishing that you wanted to move to Australia but you just left it too late. Let's face it, if moving to Australia is something that you really, really want to do, then have the determination to go out and do it. Overall, I can see how this video is trying to be educational, but it's presenting things in quite a polarised view. If you stuck it out at this guy's annoying accent, then you're probably going to believe half the crap that he's been telling you for the last 15 minutes. And you've got to ask yourself the question, are you the type of person that's actually going to fit in Australia? Thank you for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to give us a like. If you want to check out the rest of our channel, then make sure to subscribe. And have a look at this video which shows you how we got here in the first place. Give it a click.